I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
Welcome to Women Atheists Unload. Today we're dismantling a diabolically dishonest documentary, The World After Trump, just in time for the US elections. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell for notifications so you never miss a show, and use that share button to send that wacky uncle who still wears his red hat every single day this video. Skeptic Haven is monetized, and that means you can send super chats. Hit us with your best questions as we go, and we'll answer them at the end of the show. Now, let's meet today's panel.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all for joining. This should be a fun time. Would y'all like to introduce yourselves real quick, like say who you are, where you're from, what you do, and all of that? Let's start with Ryan and go around clockwise.
Sure. Hi, I am Ryan Caltastic, and I make content here on YouTube about my deconstruction from a cult that I grew up in called the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I love this journey, and I'm learning a lot. And thankfully, I'm learning a lot from beautiful people like you here. So I'm glad to be here on the panel today. Thank you.
Hell yeah.
Hi, my name is Maya Atkinson. You can find me at Maya Atkinson because, I have great creative brain there. More of a science. I deal with science deniers, and we debunk, science skeptics.
Pseudoscience and other silliness.
Yes, all of the things. And we run the gamut. If there's somebody lying about science on the internet, we're covering it. We do that every Sunday from 9:30 to 11:30 p.m. EST.
Hell yeah. What up with you, Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary. I talk about Amish stuff. And with the Misfit Amish on pretty much all social media. However, I'm currently writing a book that's looking at toxic group behaviors compared to Amish theology. And I'm knee deep and mind deep in the 18 articles of confession that we had, the 16th and 17th of which talk about the ban and shunning people. It's delightful.
Delightful.
This will be a great palate cleanser.
If this is the palate cleanser, my goodness.
Sarcasm. I don't detect sarcasm.
There is no sarcasm here.
No, we would never. We're too demure.
We're mindful, very, very mindful. I would never call a title the devil's something trap.
Mm-hmm.
That would not be
ever. It would not be demure,
nor cutesy, nor demurtsy.
But what if I called it Jezebel?
Now I like Jezebel, so.
Or what if I called it Honor Thy Martyrs and Thy Fathers?
Oh.
It's got potential. Yeah.
Yeah. Does not relate to this, what we're talking about today at all.
No, we're not looking at a film about people who want to make The Handmaid's Tale real in Institute New Gilead and all of that fun stuff.
So before y'all begin, I just want to give a disclaimer. If I come across as really sarcastic, I find trauma humor and sarcasm to be valid coping skills.
Oh yeah.
And I just my last therapy session, I literally told my therapist that this election is terrifying because 20 years ago I escaped what was essentially The Handmaid's Tale with a couple different variations in how it was applied. And I would never want my child or even future generations of American children to grow up in an environment like what is being put out in Project 2025.
God.
So that's my
Yeah.
disclaimer. If I'm salty, it's because I used to tell people to go watch The Handmaid's Tale to understand how I grew up in some aspects.
Sarcasm is my native tongue.
Okay, we should be all right.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, we do have to deal with this film. So we'll see how it goes, but I hope y'all have your therapists on speed dial just in case. Let's
God.
get started with some background. So who are the filmmakers for this thing? The World After Trump was produced by Resurrection Pictures, whose other current film is Genesis Paradise Lost. PJ Video, who seems to be a typical one-man videographer for hire with no obvious ideological inclinations. New Revolution Entertainment, which is the company of the director Dwight Thompson, who does have a few films and festival wins to his credit, and executive producer Bill Harity, who owns Resurrection Pictures. Also named is Paul Crouch Jr., the son of the televangelist couple behind Trinity Broadcasting, whose own company is called Cinemills. You know, like diploma mills, but for movies. Associate producers are Eric Hovind, who also was involved with the Genesis movies, you may recall, and Philip Pate, who, as far as I can tell, did the cover art for the poster. So, boiled down, it's a faith-based producer, the director, their pet companies, a grift for Jesus guy, Eric Hovind, and a handful of hired flunkies. Now, let's get to the main course. There are 9 main sections of the film, and we're going to tackle them in order. So the first fun bit here, I'm clicking on multiple things at once. I'm talented that way. First is the intro montage, which is a mixture of legal documents and patriotic imagery set to an audio track of politicians saying political things with a dash of Bible verse thrown in for good measure. What do you folks think about this introductory tone setting that the producers have put together for us?
Oh my.
You said
Well,
Eric
first-
Hovind, and like I just heard screaming in my head after that.
Yeah, same. When I went back through and I was like looking up the people in the credits, I'm like, does that say what? Now, for anybody who doesn't know, all one of you, Eric Hovind is the son of convicted felon and creationist, both of them, Kent Hovind. He stole his father's ministry and uses the $14 million in his bank account to produce propaganda pieces which heavily push Jesus and anti-science with the likes of Ken Ham and Ray Comfort and all the rest, the whole cast of characters. He is a trip. And to have him involved in this shows that it's not just politics. It's not even just Mike Huckabee flavor evangelism. It's straight up science-denying creationism behind this film.
Okay, but also when they go in there and they have like historical figures that were foundational to America making statements, and then they throw in a sprinkling of Bible verses. What they're trying to do is promote this narrative that benefits them and their agenda. It's typically what, people like this and groups of people like this have done historically throughout history. It's opening the door to set the stage to say we're being persecuted for our religious beliefs. But really what they're actually trying to do is rewrite history so that it benefits them and so that it gives them the ability to impose their beliefs onto everybody else in society. Because now if we don't conform to their expectations, they want us to be punished for it.
Yeah, it's fascism tactics. As you said, it has been going all through history. but fascism kind of amped that up. I mean, I've said in other places, it seems like they're using 1984 as a handbook, and that's kind of true in the way with 1984, they had whole departments dedicated to rewriting history. They're not even in power right now, and they're still actively trying to do that, which is
And
a strategy.
Where have we seen white people do this before? Let's be real. These are white people, primarily.
Yeah.
Where have we seen them do this before?
Everywhere.
History is long.
I was going to say, I mean, we see this all throughout history, and I don't know that there's a nation that hasn't done it. I am thinking of Nazi Germany, but that wasn't possibly one of their more defining features, but it is not indigenous to them.
Yeah, it's an evolution kind of thing. Ironically, from a group of creationist and creationist-leaning people, it's a refinement of the same tactics that have been used all throughout history, but this is, the latest patch, the DLC, if you will.
Right.
It's like the modern version.
Yeah, they've what was kind of astonishing to me is how I feel like there was a lot of like the similar eschatology of like the Jehovah's Witnesses with how they use the book of Daniel, they use Revelation, they use these beasts and these monsters in order to just play these different roles and parts. And of course, they'll position themselves as the victim or the good guy or whatever, somebody who's
both.
different. Right. Like they're now like the savior, the Jesus or what have you. And they're colonizing or using these people as their means to an end, and what they want is control of, Israel. That was I didn't
Everything.
realize how hard they were gonna everything, and I had no idea they were gonna tie it in so much with Israel. I was like, wowsies.
Yeah, which is wild, but those are whole other sections, but they do foreshadow it a bit in the intro montage. So they've got all the different treaties and the acts of certain politicians and so forth. Eyes opening, heart realigning says, have to admit, I don't envy the position the U.S. is in.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I think we all hate it right now.
I know. I need my passport. U.S. government, get on it.
But I do worry, like, to tie in with what Mary said with the beginning and how they flashed all those documents, and it was very, trying to be political and give this interpretation, a new interpretation, which is what they do typically with the Bible and with prophecy, is a new interpretation of what the forefathers or the founding fathers had in mind when they were writing up all these documents, and now that tone is going to be something biblical that's going to lead to this certain the place and time is now, because that's how they always do with these doomsday cults. We're in the time is now.
Well, and they use symbology at the end, to justify. So the ends justify the means mentality is very much present. But that sets the stage. To me, that's setting the stage of oh, we're just honoring our ancestors. This is somebody who has a nostalgia for the good old days. And who were the good old days good for? Who was it good for? It was good for, and what kind of men?
Landowning white men.
White men.
Rich white men.
Yeah,
there were poor white men that were not doing so well.
And now they're setting the stage for them to do the classic Darvo. They deny that this is the reality. They deny that the founding fathers were deists. Many of them were deists, if you look into it, which means they didn't believe in one omnipotent being. There were multiple deities. So if you understand that, you understand how the Constitution was written in the first place. They're literally setting the stage so they can deny the reality of that. They're also turning it around to where now, when they're trying to impose their beliefs and their expectations onto other people and other cultures and other faiths and have consequences and punish people for not believing the same as them. They're now turning that around to say, we're being persecuted when people don't accept their good intentions.
Right.
Because they always had the best of intentions. They're heroes and rescuers and saviors.
Naturally.
So they're doing the classic denying, they're reversing the roles, they're playing it up, they're setting it up so they can be the persecuted. And often, like Ryan was saying, and high control religious groups, in these groups, when you have groups that are high control, whether they're religious or not, if it's a high control group who believes they're being persecuted, they will literally set the stage to feed their confirmation bias. We see it over and over and over. They have to have something to reinforce that bias because they have that confirmation bias. And if they're not actively reinforcing that bias regularly, what would happen to it?
Oh, they deconvert. That's why there has to be information control, because while you can set the internal policeman, you can prime him with all the thought-stopping cliches, you can do all the behavioral programming, you still have to control the flow of outside information to prevent cracks from forming in that barrier against actual truth from getting in.
And that's what they're doing, setting the stage with all the information that they're removing, the programs they're taking away. It's apparent that this is the push that they're going for. This has been
Oh
a
yeah,
project, like a long haul.
they don't even hide it. Like one of the open, not even Project 2025, just openly declared platform thing is, as soon as Trump gets in again, the Department of Education is gone. Why? Because education is bad for the party. It's pretty telling. And there's some more of this kind of thinking in the next section, which is globalism versus nationalism, where speakers such as Dennis Prager, Paula White, and Mike Pillow are introduced, along with many others, and they lay out the case that an international cabal of power-mad oligarchs want to take over everything and strip the U.S. of all power. And their American cabal of power-mad oligarchs taking over everything and stripping citizens of all power is the only solution. What do you folks say about that part?
Sounds like every single cult leader I've ever heard of, whether it's a group of people or it's one person with a person, couple people upholding them. Sounds like every single cult leader I've ever heard of.
Goodness gracious.
They have.
And the way they were just taking words and manipulating their definitions, and it was like, oh my God, like I've just seen this all before. I've heard this all before, like redefining things just to fit their, again, to fit their narrative.
Yeah, there's a... They used to say of Mussolini, at least the trains ran on time. And here in America, we tended to take that literally. But it was sort of a euphemism for exactly what was happening under fascism. If the 4:30 train showed up and the clock said 5:10, the clock was wrong because by fiat, the trains ran on time. If that's a 4:30 train, it must be 4:30, no matter what the clock says. That's what they were trying to convey. And that's the kind of shit we see with this sort of equivocation and forcing terms where they don't really belong, misapplying things, the mirror propaganda of reversing the roles like we were discussing earlier. All of this stuff.
Oh, gosh. It was very heavy. It was very heavy to watch because I just felt like I was right back in those days of the cult, hearing like some of this stuff be regurgitated just all over again, but with the new interpretation to fit today.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that stood out to me as very propagandistic and heavy rhetoric. Like Dennis Prager said, if the US isn't the best country ever in all of human history, then we're nothing. And it's very all or nothing with these people. Michael Knowles' CPAC speech, it's all or nothing. Everything is black and white. Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. But this whole concept of globalism versus nationalism. Either you want to give away everything to the powers that be, whoever the hell they are. We know who they are. It's the same people as they were mad at in World War II, but that's neither here nor there. Or you have to give the Christian nationalists total power to enact a Taliban-style theocracy. Those are your only two options. And there's so much like this. Like, they go on about how global powers have failed before, and they talk about the League of Nations. Dennis Prager goes into this a little bit, and he talks about how the League of Nations failed because World War II happened. Well, what caused World War II, Dennis? Who was doing things that made the war happen? Could it possibly have been two massively nationalist countries aggressively conquering everything around them? Could it have been the nationalists? Perhaps?
I mean, but Ember, how dare you?
How dare
It's
you?
so
You know that
wild.
they also said that this is in the Bible. This is a sign of the end times. There will be one global power, right? Didn't they say that?
They did. That's we're I already changed the tab because we're not quite ready to move to the next section. Yeah, the New World Order thing, that was pretty wild.
It
The
always
narrator.
is, and I don't know. I think it's this boogeyman that they get out of Revelation, where it equals Satanism or whatever. But as far as I can tell, as long as man has invented boats in other nations, we've been trading and working with one another. There hasn't necessarily been this fear. Actually, when we do see the fear of other nations, it's propagandistic, where it's like, oh, we have to hate them, and those are bad people, so we must conquer them. And well, the land's still here, so I guess we can take it.
It's indicative of the us versus them mentality.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It usually our go-to is to work with one another until we get greedy, and then all of a sudden it's the us versus them.
Yeah, it's tribalism being weaponized to get power for a very few. In fact, at 11:45 in the movie, not even 12 minutes in, they play audio of Trump saying he wants to overthrow the government. Like, they just put it right out there, and they know that their cultists are the ones watching this, so it'll just zoom right over their heads.
Yeah. They'll interpret it however they need to make the movie, however they tell them to interpret it.
Yeah, all the points they make about how bad globalism is and depriving states of their power and sovereignty, all of those points are exactly equally valid for the federal government. Like, you could make the argument that the federal government is depriving the states of their proper sovereignty. It's, of course, we know if push came to shove and there were a move to, say, bring back the Confederacy, all of these fuckers would be on the side of the Confederacy. It's pretty trippy. Eyes opening, heart realigning sends a super chat, £1.99, and says, "What happens in USA will change the world." And that's true. Unfortunately, we've seen, the U.S. has been setting global policy benchmarks for generations at this point. And every time we embrace, let's say, a regressive movement, it seems to spread. The UK, for example, has been rather famously moving farther and farther to the right because the Overton window in the U.S. has moved so far to the right. and it's pretty wild. I mean, they left the EU for fuck's sake. Very
And
unfortunate.
another interesting thing too, because I'm sorry, I forget who mentioned about the us versus them thing first, but also they I forget who it was. It was, I think, one of the blonde ladies who said that we're also dealing with not just an enemy of flesh and blood, but also, like, demonic figures and evil spirits. And it was like, oh, here we go.
It's spiritual warfare, it's
Yeah.
Right. This
theocratic
is
warfare, it's
exactly
demon spirits,
Right.
it's demon possession. This is
right.
all a religious thing. This isn't necessarily like, I don't understand how this is supposed to be political, but they're incorporating all of this faith-based.
There's no difference for them.
They've
And
been pushing it for years.
Yeah, but they, to the point where they've intertwined their faith with their politics. Like, there is no separation.
And
Okay, but my ancestors, we pride ourselves on being some of the first supporters of separation of church and state.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, that's what the nation was founded on. It's what the earliest settlers came here to escape. And they, they strip their books, they American wash them, and then, say, oh no, they were all Christian and they were all exactly your flavor of Christian. And, this is therefore a Christian nation.
No.
Yeah, never mind that the creationist movement and the political nonsense that comes along with it didn't get started until the 1960s.
None of the founding fathers
never mind that.
had any of the current religious beliefs. Like, honestly, not even Catholics. Like, Catholics moved so far in that time.
I recall the last infallible papal decree was in 1867, which went something to the effect of, it was in Italian, so I have to paraphrase, slavery is good, actually. So yeah, Catholicism has changed a little bit. Not much, not enough.
And a lot of the core principles have changed, especially this century. I don't want to get into Catholicism and all that, but it's changed since I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It's nuts to me. But yeah, I mean, they, in their heads, they're fighting a religious holy war. And, for us, it's political. For us, we're trying to preserve democracy. We're trying to preserve our rights. And for them, they are fighting for Jesus.
The foot soldiers think that.
To fail is to be taken over by the devil and to burn in hell forever, ostensibly.
It is such a weird double standard, for lack of a better term, how we have to support the evangelical approved candidate or else the devil wins, but at the same time their ultimate goal is to bring about Armageddon as a means of making Jesus come back.
Right, because Jesus isn't working fast enough for us. He needs to hurry on up.
Yeah, they believe that they can make this happen at their own hand.
Yeah.
At the expense of, like, at what cost? At the expense of Palestinians ultimately, and our democracy as well, allowing this to kind of
at the expense of all of us. Jesus is going to come back, wave his D around and, show the world who is truly right. Like that's the end goal. Everyone must know that we're right. Like, okay.
We have to end history now while we're winning.
Yeah.
Also, we have to ensure that it ends now while patriarchal control is alive and well. Don't forget that part.
Yeah.
Legislating.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because God forbid that women or the people of color have, any amount of control.
Right.
I mean, God forbid they have access to medical care. I mean, what's that? Who deserves medical care? If a man hasn't given you the authority to seek medical care, why are you thinking thou Jezebel? Okay.
Did you know that 50 years ago, women gained the ability to have their own credit card? It's within the lifetimes of these, well, not Eric Hovind, but most of these older folks.
Yeah.
Dennis
Yeah.
Prager, for example, he was alive when that happened, and he doesn't like it.
No.
Well, and not only that, wasn't it in like 1960s or 1970s that Black women got the right to vote?
It was
Well,
long after we got ours. I know that.
Black women are included in the 19th Amendment.
Caddy saying
Black men
72.
were.
It was, but white women got the right to vote in the early 1900s. I think it was like 1918 or 1920 or
20.
something like that.
1920, yeah.
Yeah.
And
they,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and then they didn't bring Black women
Nope.
to the same level for at least, I believe it was at least probably 40 or 50 years.
Black people were marginalized until we got this Voting Rights Act in, I want to say, the 60s. Just period. I mean, there were like, between like the poll taxes and the legacy, I'm sorry, blacking out. But yeah, it was, especially in the South, the jelly bean counting and, it got to be obnoxious.
Yeah, all the Jim Crow and the various other things. So yeah, Black women nominally had the right to vote, legally had the right to vote.
Yeah.
But from a practical perspective,
right?
Yeah.
Fuck no.
And that's typical. It's this is this opportunity, land of the free. It's just a lot of rhetoric, and then behind those words are the reality of them taking away our rights and trying to implement this end of times. Ends justifies the means.
Oh yeah, they know full well that the end of times thing is bullshit. They're selling it to their followers. This is all of this ultimately goes back to Seven Mountains Dominionism, which is what's behind the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025. To them, religion is just another lever of control out of seven mountains, right? Education and government and religion. So the religion lever is very effective, especially when mingled with government and patriotism and USA. Then you can say, oh, you don't love Jesus? Well, you must hate America. It's they mix and mingle everything together. For example, the New World Order thing. The narrator says that the term was coined by George Bush, but in fact, it's a very old phrase. Roosevelt used it. Woodrow Wilson used it. The modern concept, the concept of it being a conspiracy of powers, came from H.G. Wells, who gave it that flavor of a technocratic world state. And after World War II, but prior to Bush Sr., it was used almost exclusively by end-times obsessed religious zealots, people committed to bringing about the end of the world as quickly as possible so Jesus will come back. Its use here throughout this documentary indicates that some things haven't changed.
It's also a fear-mongering tactic. If you keep people living under such high amounts of fear, there's literally, they can't even think critically because they're constantly in survival mode. So when you do that, like it's a way of manipulating people, like you said, Amber, throughout history.
Yeah,
they just get better at it. It's natural selection after a fashion. They come up with propaganda and rhetoric and tactics and techniques and manipulations, and it takes a generation or more for the counter apologists to dispel that nonsense and show. And even then, we only ever reach between a third and a half of people. But then they come up with even better stuff to get around the critical thinking, and it's an arms race.
And the loaded language is so prevalent throughout it. There were certain parts I just sat there and was like, y'all really haven't come up with anything new. You're just doing the same things and expecting a different result.
We saw that a lot in the next section, socialism. Oh no, the horrors of people sharing resources and governing for the common good. This, once again, it's just a screenshot from the thing, but you get the idea. what they call socialism is not what is actually socialism. They just call everything they don't like socialism. And they conflate a lot of things. They use the presumption of a confirmation bias for their audience in a lot of things. Like they conflate socialism with communism, for example. One of the things that Prager throws out is, well, look at the Soviet Union. I mean, really. That's not socialism, my guy. That was an authoritarian state using a communist-based economic system. What do you mean? So what do you folks think about that part?
Well, when we got to the communism and socialism thing, I had to laugh because all I could think of was a cadence from when I was in the army that we used to sing about communists. I have no comment right now. It's pervasive language.
I mean, I think this is more of them trying to get ahead of the narrative. If there is a term that is floating around, we don't want people to look into it. We want to tell them what it is so that they don't feel the need. And therefore, they stay under our control. So if, we can make communism and socialism and CRT boogeymen, then people won't read about what they actually are and either like them or be, neutral. They'll, fearmonger and other, as we want them to do.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that. One of the things that really stood out to me was, I forget which speaker said it, but he was talking about, he went to visit the old Soviet Union and he talked to one of the Eastern Orthodox priests. And he said, what did they do about the priests during the communist era? And apparently the priest said, well, they killed them.
Yeah.
Killed all of them. And I'm like, what do you mean, my guy? What are you talking about? Yeah, under Lenin, because Lenin was a Marxist, the religion was disenfranchised, but it wasn't dispelled. The churches weren't knocked down. What are you talking about? And in 1943, Stalin brought the church back. He made religion a lever of control. The Eastern Orthodox Church has been the Russian state religion since 1943. They weren't atheist. They were prescriptivist Christians. What do you mean they killed all the priests? Those were employees of the state.
Well, they weren't our kind of Christians. Therefore, they were atheists.
Ah, right. My bad. I forgot how this works for a minute.
Can we just enter the no true Scotsman fallacy, also synonymous with the no true Christian fallacy and the no true Amish? Not a real Amish fallacy.
Yeah.
Not a real American. What makes someone a real American?
Well, I'm clearly not the right color to be a real American.
Well, I don't speak the right language as my first language and my primary language, so I'm not a real American. I've been told to go back to my country, but I was born in America. So, what makes someone a real American?
That's that would be a fun one. The next time Matt Walsh comes at someone and says, "What is a woman?" What is a real American?
Again, it's the fallacy.
Actually, a better question.
Someone who would cut off the nose to spite their face. You would give up your own bodily harmony in order to benefit America, or this idea of America, because I see a lot of people sacrificing their rights.
It's the same person who would
the fascism.
It's the same person, Ryan, who would throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Or the trees that vote for the axe because the handle was made of wood.
Or the women that vote for Gilead.
Oh, help me. Just help. And the thing is, what frightens me is it's becoming even illegal to be homeless. So we're enacting all these like slavery like ideas. I mean, we've known that. We've known that there's always been this criminalization of people in order to put them in now very privatized prisons. So either you're going to be born and work for the system, or you're going to be born and work for the system as a criminal. Like, you're not going to have a choice. If you're poor, up, criminalized. Have a baby, can't take care of them, probably going to be criminalized, not paying your child support.
Yeah,
You're gonna
however they need to do it. You're going
Right.
to be a cog in the machine one way or the other. You can either do it with a
Yeah.
smile on your face and a thank you, sir, may I have some more, or you'll be put in shackles. It's been spoken about a lot in recent years that the United States never actually did end slavery. There's been exceptions to it. The constitutional amendment that did away with it has an exception carved out for people who commit crimes.
Right.
And immediately after, we started implementing policies that targeted brown people, but they didn't mind taking in the occasional white either, to make them the property of the state and implement work gangs and prison factories and so forth. And we still do that today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I say this to people who I'm like, you may think that you're not going to be affected, but you have to remember, it always starts with the people of color, and then it goes to the poor whites. And who are they trying to make poor whites? All non-rich. So it's going to affect you now or later. So, you may as well just stand with us now.
It always strikes me as odd when a modern politician, no matter the level, talks about what they're going to do for the middle class. What middle class?
Right.
There's the ultra fucking wealthy, and there's the just above homeless.
Really?
What are we doing here?
It's the people living paycheck to paycheck that they're like, oh, you're middle class. But what is that when you live paycheck to paycheck and you don't have like a financial safety network? And then these same people, they say, well, you just need to work harder. I have literally worked my ass off for 20 years. And last year, my car that I almost had paid off was literally stolen from my driveway, literally almost exactly a year ago.
Ugh.
And do you know what I got from it? Shit, a lot of work, a lot more work. How are we supposed to like pull ourselves up from the bootstraps? That's literally just a way to disavow any form of acknowledgement that they have created an environment for the ultra wealthy to thrive.
And the evil is always going to be the brown people. Like, the evil is the people who are trying to immigrate here. And
Yes.
like, and it's like, and then they even showed like how small that population was, but they're responsible for all of the freaking issues and the murders and the raping and what have you that were happening. And it's like, honey, I could point to you all the preachers that have had their hands doing
Hold on. If Rain says it's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 4 boys by the age of adulthood that have experienced some form of sexual violence, and the Pew Center says that over 66% of Americans are Christians.
Oh, what them stats say, honey?
But it's not your kind of Christian. Please tell me what kind of Christian it is.
Exactly. Those stats are not lying. Those stats are not being twisted. They speak very loudly, and that is where the harm is being allowed and perpetrated and grows.
Because they deny any form of accountability. They deny any form of validity. They deny anything that would ask them or demand of them to get up and stop allowing people to sit there and perpetrate crimes of a sexually violent nature and still attend their churches. But it's not my church. It's not my church. Again, no true Scotsman.
It's the people crossing the border. It's just all them. They're the ones doing
So they're villainizing, they're blame shifting, they're projecting. What they are doing, that accusation is a confession.
That's a general rule of their whole thing. And in fact, the term for it is mirror propaganda. It's when you take what you're doing and you project it onto your enemy so that it makes them look guilty, or if the truth gets found out, it serves as a smokescreen because you can say, oh, well, they're just accusing me because I said they were doing it.
Yeah. Every
And it creates that
accusation is a
reasonable doubt.
confession. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
But touching on what you were saying, the tribalism, the my church, they bring up a phrase along those lines in the section about socialism, and they use it throughout the rest of the documentary. But it premieres here, the enemies within, and
Oh my
that's a
God.
very devious phrase because it perks your fear instinct. It makes you look around. You can't trust anybody. Anybody could be one of those Democrats. You know, it
Anybody.
hardens the tribalism.
Do you wanna hear my version of this?
Sure.
Anybody could go and study the Bible with somebody who doesn't believe the right way, the Amish way. And then they get a false globe, which is a false belief system. And now they're going to lead you astray because birds of a feather all flock together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the things that really blew my freaking mind in this section was the one dark-skinned woman that they had, the token brown person, actually said the words, they're trying to inspire a plantation mentality.
Oh my God, I thought I was gonna throw up when they said that. I said, "Oh man, they put these women on here intentionally so that
Oh,
way
yeah.
they could say the things that they wanted to say, but now they had those women say it for them." And I
Yeah.
was like,
Okay,
Exactly.
but
damn it.
also it's part of the thing where they create an environment where people who are vulnerable and who are actively harmed by their policies, their ideology, their theology, their groupthink, their group behavior, they seek out positions of power, proximity to power, because they benefit
Mhm.
from it. And so for them, they often operate in this mentality of like, if I'm close enough to the power, it will not affect me negatively.
Mhm.
And it might not affect them negatively in the short term, but in the long term, it will affect them and their future generations negatively.
Yeah. We see it all the time on there's this beautiful woman who sings this song that she made called I Never Thought the Leopards Would Eat My Face. And it's a series where some person is standing right beside the white supremacy, getting their little crumbs, like, no, everything's great, this is fine, this is what I support, see how great it is. And then when they turn on them, it's like, oh goodness gracious, why did this happen to me? Why did they hate me? I was one of them. No, you weren't. You never were seen as a human that entire
It's
time. You were being
it's so
used as a
wild.
pawn.
Yes.
It's like the opposite of that famous poem, first they came for the Jews. It's like they took
Yes.
that poem, inverted it, and made it like a battle hymn. Like, oh, they took away the Jews. Oh, they took away the gays. Oh, they're burning the trans people. Oh shit, they're coming for me. I guess I should have been a Baptist or something. Like, what do you think was gonna happen? My goodness. It's so wild. But it's also more projection that mirror propaganda, because when they say the enemies within, there are actually enemies within. Like you folks were mentioning earlier, the actual danger to children are in the churches. We've seen the
Yes.
Right.
statistics, the CDC and other organizations. The number one threat to children in the US is, of course, guns. The number two threat to children is pastors,
Thank you.
religious leaders.
People in positions of power, when religious organizations sit there and they cast out the victims of these crimes, even if they're children, or they socially isolate them, or they remove access to resources to them, and they prop up and they give the perpetrators of sexual crimes against children positions of power in the church. They promote them.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about the group behavior and beliefs that they're okay with this? Does the do the congregation members know about this?
Right. That
Oh,
is
they do. There's a whole
it's
thing.
forgiven. It's
Yeah,
like it's a
like
sin that's
Ryan.
like just for whatever reason easily for them forgiven. But if we have this sin of needing an abortion because healthcare is healthcare, our body does what it does, we can't be forgiven. We have to be forced to die.
Okay,
Yeah,
but the Bible
that's
says
because
that life begins at first breath. Like
that's right.
let's be real.
Like even they knew, like, hey,
Let's not even just that, but you're given instructions. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually a section in the Bible that talks about giving you instructions on how to perform an abortion. So, like,
oh yes,
The
so
the
like,
it's
can
ceremony
we?
of the bitter
temple.
waters.
Yes.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes. You go to the temple. You do the right things.
You get the
So
magic potion.
So what gives you the right to sit there on your fucking high horses, rolling in, like pretending like you're some kind of knights on white horses to save the rest of the world and save all of these unborn babies? But really, the Bible says life begins at first breath,
Oh,
and the Bible
Very
also gives
clearly.
you instructions on how to perform abortions. But you're
right.
pretending you're your rescuers and saviors. Also, why do you give a fuck about these fetuses that don't even necessarily have potential for life in the first place, but you don't give a crap about children that are actively suffering in America today,
Currently, right, that are alive. You're setting no
right now.
programs in place in the future for these people who could have babies possibly, but just can't afford. Maybe that's one of the issues, just medically, whatever that, it's not my business, but whatever it might be. How about help them so that way they maybe possibly can have these babies? But there's been a rise in Texas, like a surge in um sorry, I can't remember the
Infant
exact
mortality.
amount.
Not
Yes,
Uh,
just
Mother
that's what it is.
mortality.
not
Yes,
just
and
infant
Maternal
oh,
too,
mortality.
but like it's
It's
been really high infant mortality, and yeah,
yeah.
maternal mortality is on the rise as well. But also, when you were saying that, I was thinking about all the states that also put in effective abortion bans, which is pretty
yeah,
much banning after 6 weeks. Those same states also rejected federal funding for free school lunches. It's not about the
like,
children. It never has been.
please make that
That's
make
right.
sense. The hypocrisy, I can't it's like the double
It's like
talk out of the side of their mouth. Like they want to demonize people who can't, like, afford to take care of a child, just as some kind of sloppy human being who deserves to be punished and have this child. Meanwhile, you really don't give an F about these babies. If they get it shot in school, you don't give a
you don't
F.
you don't
But
care when our children are being mass killed in our
Mm-mm.
schools. You don't care when our children in kindergarten are literally going through terrifying things like having to do drills to prepare for mass school
Right?
shootings because that's the state of American schools right now. You don't
Yep.
care about that. You don't care when children don't have enough to eat. You don't care when children are living in extreme poverty and they may not even have houses to live in. You don't
Right.
care about that, but you care about these fetuses and you
And an
pretend you're knights in white horses. Like, no.
and a
but
19-year-old just recently died because of this lack of abortion care. And yeah, it's been happening, because of whatever, like ectopic pregnancy, whatever. Just bad things are happening, abnormal pregnancies, just anomalies that happen in pregnancy. They're not as rare as you think. And it really was so I was just taken aback. I didn't know what to say. I was kind of gobsmacked whenever they brought up about the whole, like, well, actually, to I don't remember exactly what they said, but to allow abortions is actually racist because the person who was
oh yeah.
advocating
Oh my God.
Yeah,
for, and I was like,
that's a whole thing in the abortion section later on.
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's
When they said
okay,
that,
sorry.
Ryan, I'm pretty sure I just screamed.
Yeah, I just was like, I was biting my lip, quite
Well,
frankly. I wanted to scream.
I mean, it's their go-to, right? Believing in evolution is also racist.
Yeah.
So, yeah, everything they don't like, it's socialist and racist.
Well, and didn't they also like pull in Obama to like demonize Obama too?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
no,
They
Obama's
always
a
do that.
literal antichrist.
He wore a tan suit once, but
Oh, God.
one of the few areas of
Headline. What a headline.
one of the few areas of agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats, unfortunately, has to do with the next section, which they just non sequiturly jumped to, which is Israel. And this section's pretty self-explanatory. It's we have to defend Israel. It's the holy city. It's God's chosen people. Even though the Christians are the ones who are getting saved, but we have to defend Israel no matter what they do, no matter what happens. And they make a big deal out of it. And clearly the context has shifted a little bit more dramatically. But to touch on what we were just talking about, to tie these two together, we don't have money for kids to have school lunches, but we have plenty of money to send for Israel to buy bombs and planes and tanks, etc. So what do y'all think about this part?
Infuriating that we have our friends and family in the South who are suffering with these catastrophes that have just recently hit, and they're not getting all of the funds that they need and are going to need long term, in places to live, because their homes have been destroyed, or maybe their loved one who was their caretaker is now gone because of the disaster, what have you. Yet and still we have billions upon billions to send to drop bombs our manufactured bombs. So we're profiting off of the death of the people who have been living on the land for thousands of years. I don't get it. And homelessness is illegal. And
Mhm.
at the
And
same
life is
time,
sacred.
right. And in Florida, it's now going to be illegal to be homeless. They're being hit, probably going to be up and up and up, these hurricanes, what have you. So more and more people are going to be houseless, and it's going to be criminalized. We're just, and then whenever the floods do hit and the heavy rains, they just leave them in the prisons to rot.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're property, so who cares, right? Because it's a plantation mentality, as you might say. But
Right.
it's been true for a while. They're just formalizing the situation. Like up here in New York State, winters they hit minus 40 sometimes. And you cannot be homeless. You will die. And so there are homeless people who deliberately commit crimes in front of police. They'll steal a loaf of bread and then turn themselves into a police car, because then they get to go to a nice warm jail where there are meals. It's an actual survival strategy at this point to get yourself imprisoned so you don't die. That's what we've come to as a country. And as we were just discussing about how prisoners are made into a low-cost workforce, that's not a bug, it's a feature. That's what's
Yes.
supposed to happen.
Intentional.
Yeah.
It's a mechanism. Yeah. And I
Well,
think is it like 8 billion or something like that would fix homelessness? I
I
feel like
haven't looked at those
I've heard a
numbers
few
in a
different
while.
numbers. I don't think there's anything
it's
definitive,
something
though.
that could have been done at this point with the amount of money we have sent.
Oh no, we have the money to, we have the infrastructure to do it. We just don't have the political will.
So-
Because like they're not throwing money at our politicians, so they don't have to, and they usually don't vote. There's no impetus for politicians to think about them twice.
well, and politicians, like, I'm just going to say this, one of the most disheartening and immense feelings of betrayal that I experienced is when I thought I escaped so much oppression, and I realized the hypocrisy within American politics
Yeah.
and how I just feel like, how I feel about this, what they're doing, what Ryan was talking about, I feel like it's parallel to what I wrote on the back of my book cover. And what I wrote on there is this book is a story of childhood trauma, desperation, and survival as a born Amish, queer, neurodivergent, and AFAB person in America's Amish country with oppression and silencing from all sides. It's a collective failure of adults within medical, secular, and Amish communities to provide safety to abused children. How many more children are there like this? How many more people are there like this when the floods come? And how long are we collectively sitting back and allowing these human rights violations to continue in the land of the brave and the home of the free? We sit here and we create these wars and we send American soldiers overseas to do what? And what do we use to justify that? And then we turn around and we fail to take care of our own. And what does that say about you?
And we send money to other countries to go kill brown people for us, which
Yes.
the endless struggle, the whole, I mean, the way they lay out the history of Israel, how it was, there's so much, how it was founded when, as soon as Britain pulled out, it was formerly occupied British territory, and then there was the war, and then there's the whole prophecy angle on that too, like it's the only nation ever to exist back in Christ's time, and again today, at the same time, there's the Christian church.
Right.
What do you mean, my guy? Egypt is still around. China is
Yeah.
still around. What are you talking about?
They're trying to resurrect this idea. They're trying to mirror this idea that, Israel has always been, will always be. And, oh, nations do fall. Like, we understand that. We're not stupid, and we understand how all nations tend to fall. But this is prophecy and la-di-da-di-da. It's different because, of course.
Yeah, and additionally, that whole earlier section about globalism, we have to America first this and America first that. But when it comes to Israel, oh, international ties are good now. There's no
Hold on.
consistency.
How is America first if you're not taking care of the people who are the most disenfranchised within America?
Oh, those aren't people, though.
What makes them not people, Amber?
They haven't pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They don't deserve to be people.
Okay, but they don't even have bootstraps, and they can't acquire bootstraps because they've legislated away their ability and capacity to even access or receive bootstraps.
No. They don't have bootstraps because of their moral failings. If Jesus loved them, he would give them bootstraps. That's how this works.
Like Mitt Romney said, why didn't they just try being rich?
What? Look, Jesus loves Joel Osteen. Jesus loves Dennis Prager.
Okay.
Jesus loves...
which is wild since he's a Jew.
Okay, but...
Jesus loves all the prosperity gospel preachers. And if you would just love Jesus with their heart, you too could have prosperity and bootstraps of your own.
You know what, Maya? When I cried out to Jesus on the floor of my bedroom, he did absolutely fucking nothing.
Well, it's because you didn't love him enough, and he knew. He knew.
I was literally a child.
I'm not trying to.
I know.
I honestly don't believe that.
But Jesus also drove the tax collectors from the temple.
No. Look, we don't preach that.
He was a
rebel part. No, we don't preach that part. Look.
Yeah. He was anti-establishment, but they completely
we don't like tax collectors because they tax the church, which is obviously wrong.
Yeah. Yep. No taxes in the church.
And that's clearly what Jesus meant by that. Jesus,
that's right.
At one point they said something almost practically like Arabs are bad. Or Arabs are evil.
Yeah, brown people.
I can't remember exactly
the phrase.
The warlike Arabian nations all declared war on Israel simultaneously.
I'm like, oh my God, you've literally been the antagonist the entire time. You are using those people, the Zionist entity that you've created, which is a mix of, people who believe whoever, whatever, but they're Zionists. And, they believe they have a right to something, and you're using them as like your long arm of the law to antagonize. And because, like, all these, the Muslims or the Arabs or whatever, oh God, they're so terrible, but we need this guy to bring the peace. Israel's our only way to peace, but Israel's the one who continuously got their hand trying to grab people's land and have made that very abundantly
Oh yeah.
apparent that
Yeah,
that
the
is
whole
the
thing with-
No, but like
intention
no,
the entire
it's,
time.
again, it's just the brown people being savages,
Right.
because that's the narrative
I
that
think
we need to peddle.
I think that
Which is-
honestly, I think their intention is to completely erase, like, brown Jesus, because we all know that Jesus was brown, right? But they want to erase history, so they're trying to erase American history and the foundations of it, and religion really wasn't part of it. But I think they're also trying to erase history over there, because in 50 to 100 years, you could erase the idea that Jesus was ever brown if you can just put lighter skinned people over in that area and change how the entire history happened, like you tried to do with indigenous history and are still trying to continuously erode right now, and replace the brown idea Jesus with this new, whiter, better white supremacy Jesus.
I really don't think their long game is that long. I think if we don't kill ourselves with the climate, it would be a happy byproduct that they would certainly capitalize on.
They're killing us.
But
with
I
this
honestly,
climate, though.
when you listen to them, they really are trying to usher in the second coming of Jesus. Like, that is their primary goal.
Yeah,
all of
and
this.
that actually brings us pretty neatly to the next section, which is the USA in the Bible and the end times.
Oh yeah.
Is the USA in the Bible? Are the end times prophecies upon us? Can we make sense of all the seven-headed beasts and monsters from the sea and whatnot? How do y'all reckon? First of all, should we even trust the Bible? Is that a reliable source for future history, do you suppose?
Well, hold up. Which Bible are we talking about? Which
Yeah,
one?
right.
Many
Yeah,
different versions of the Bible. Are we talking
Yeah.
Trump's, like, $60 made in China Bible that's been altered, although the
I
word
think
of God
Trump's
isn't
version
sufficient?
is King James. I think
Or-
Trump's is the King James.
But,
Well, yeah,
version.
but his Bible is special because it has, like, the Constitution with amendments in it, but it has erased the amendments that give people rights.
Right.
It's the Lee
Oh,
Greenwood
did
Bible.
not
It
know
even
that.
has the chorus of God Bless the USA, Lee Greenwood's only hit song, in it. He just took the Lee Greenwood Bible and put Trump on the cover.
So, I mean,
Sounds
like,
King Trump
or
would be-
are we talking about the version of the Bible that my brother, who left the older Amish church and then went and joined the Seventh-day Adventist church, and then we got into this heated debate about the validity of the Bible, and he told me that there's 19 different versions, and the Seventh-day Adventist version, it's the only correct version.
Of
So,
course it is.
which version of the Bible are we talking about in the
The
first
most
place?
correct one, of course. That's the one that they're talking
inerrant
about.
and infallible word.
The inerrant one, of course, the one that doesn't have mistakes. But I thought it was like such a joke because they were all like, well, we can't say that, America's mentioned in the Bible, but what we could say that according to this prophecy, if you interpret it this way, America could be seen as the eagle. So they go and then they insert themselves into the prophecy. They said that, they couldn't really say. Like, bro, stop. We see
Yeah,
what
and-
you're doing.
The section where they start talking about the eschatology, the end of the world interpretation science, whatever the fuck they're doing there, they even they caveat saying, now this isn't confirmed by Bible scholars, it's just one speculative interpretation. But, and then they present it all as if it's fact, with the four-headed beast made of all the different critters, but not the eagle though. And what do you mean? What is this?
The guy was like, well, in the last interpretation, the beast that had all the different heads of the animals, the eagle wasn't present. So therefore, presto changeo, that must be America, the eagle.
I know,
Like,
it's the same
don't-
sort of thinking as the face on Mars. Well, it looks like a face, so there must be aliens there,
It's probably Donald Trump's face.
Yeah, sure.
But
Why
like,
not?
this, hold up. So if Bible scholars haven't, like, even confirmed this, but then they present it as facts. Like, here's the other question I have. How are people receiving this when they've been experiencing all this fear mongering about how the end times are coming that we see in the rest of the movie? I wouldn't even call this a documentary. I call this like a
It's a propaganda piece.
Yeah, it's documentary style, but yeah, like Ember said, it's definitely a propaganda piece.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they're reading into it from the very get-go because it's very, very clear if you actually read Revelations that they're talking about Nero. It's Nero
Yeah.
persecuted early Christians, and they were terrified that, like Jesus, he would come back to life and finish the job. It's apocalyptic symbolism, but it's not even thinly veiled. It's really obvious. So what are they talking about? Oh, well, this actually symbolism for the end of the world, and we know because we made it up. But then
we know because we made it up.
Yeah, and they just kind of go off the handle, and there's a whole freaking thing with this Bible prophecy, and it's just everybody's even within the film, different speakers say contradictory things because they're all making it up on their own. I mean, you have to do that with the Bible anyway, but it's
there would
really
be like
bad.
internal consistency. And then you remember that it was compiled with the help of Eric Hovind.
Right? I know. Just to pin your whole thing, your whole political thing on Revelation, like the book where they put the warning about editing the scriptures into because so many people were editing the scriptures and changing them. They changed one of the scriptures to include a prohibition on further editing of the scriptures.
Yeah, but you can't let a little thing like that come in between you and your money.
Okay, but like really, I thought you were going to say you can't let a little thing like that come between you and your God. The right way. Just
Yeah. The truth is
your God
your
and your money. I mean, is your God your money though? Is your God your money?
I mean, it does say God on the money.
And they said they were building a capitalist society. They want to make sure that we stay a very capitalist society, however that is interpreted for them, because they have their own interpretation for all these, like what does globalism mean? Globalism mean what does, what was the other word they kept throwing around? Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but they just changed the definitions as they see fit. Of course.
Yeah, equivocation and
false
shifting directions, much like the film shifted directions. And it does actually relate to the globalism thing as well, because during that section, they were talking about a UN plan to control migration around the world. We can't have the one world government. The film suddenly takes a hard right into frickin' border security for some reason. There's no segue. It's just, whoop, here we are. We're talking about the border now. And racism. We get a lot of static and not much substance on the so-called immigration crisis. People who want to close the door behind them, and some truly weird takes about how 45's failures were great, actually. Genius, in fact. A very stable genius, you might say. What are your folks' thoughts on this part?
Well, it reminds me of earlier when I was saying, like, there's no separation between their politics and their religious beliefs, like they're all one. So we must hate border policy because the right-wing politicians are saying it's bad and therefore Jesus.
It doesn't make it doesn't make any damn sense. Like, first of all, they harp on the wall, which Donald had a chance to build. He was in office for 4 years. And he did not. So what do they mean?
Bush built a wall. He conveniently forgot to mention that.
Okay, but can we also talk about what has happened to the walls historically? Have y'all ever went and seen like the Berlin Wall and what it looked like?
That's another great point, because they mention it expressly earlier. They talk about Ronald Reagan tearing down walls, and here's Trump wanting to build them.
It's again one of those like times where they're just talking out the side of their mouth, manipulating history, taking things out of context to fit their narrative.
And what has historically happened? Why are we not listening to and learning from history what happens when we get leaders that build walls? Those walls cause economic hardships. They cause people to die. They cause all kinds of things and repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually they all come down, like Great Wall of China, the Berlin Wall. When I went to Berlin, that was like a whole, you could literally tell which side of the wall was which. It was wild.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's the thing about walls, is they don't actually keep people out. They're meant to
No.
keep people in, because this wall, even if we built a wall across the entire Mexican border for some crazy ass reason, it doesn't work, because walls don't stop airplanes, and most of the people who are in the United States illegally came in on airplanes. They arrived with visas. The vast majority of undocumented people had visas that expired. That's not because they're criminals. It's because the American bureaucracy is made of red tape and incompetence.
And also, most of the drugs that come through checkpoints. It's
Mm.
not like they're immigrants with like bags of fentanyl strapped to their, and they're just jumping walls or like breaking through them. I don't.
Yeah, it
Walls
will
don't
do
solve
absolutely
the
nothing.
problem. Walls are just a band-aid to the issue. They built a wall around Palestine. I mean, that is not a solution to a problem. And we can see that that's absolutely not been a solution.
Ryan, do you think that's like, this idea of like, when people have a everything like is good or bad or right or wrong, they have this black and white thinking. And so then when they see that there's a problem, rather than doing the work to come up with the nuanced solution that actually addresses the underlying issues, they give a band-aid solution. They
Yeah.
promise long-term, effects, but really it's just a band-aid. They have to have the answers. When you have groups like that are out there and they say, we have all the answers, we're giving you the answers. Accept it.
On
Take
our
this.
right, we're writing the rules. It's on our terms. You have to accept it. That's your choice. Your choice is to accept the choices that we're handing you.
That we're
Absolutely.
defining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that we're defining ourselves. You have no input, and if you say anything against it, oh, you're just being problematic. You're not
You're
compromising.
questioning the word of God.
You're
Yeah, and
questioning
you're
You're
being
questioning
led by the
authority.
devil.
Yeah,
You're being
yeah.
angry. You're being an angry, vindictive, bitter woman.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Something's wrong with you instead of wanting to, like you said, wanting to do the work, which could solve the problems. Because I do feel like, I feel like immigration is natural. I think people been doing it for centuries, moving to and fro. And as, the earth changes and floods are coming or whatever. And I think it would be better, smarter to be prepared instead of constantly saying, we need better, then do it. If you keep seeing we need better immigration, then why aren't you doing it? Simply because that woman stood up and said, "Oh, I did the blood test and I bought my plane ticket and I did." That's a great privilege, and I'm so great that you were afforded and that you weren't forced to leave your home with nothing in your freaking hand. Like, stop pretending like this is always just so easy, and everybody has like all these months and these years to save up the money to have this plan to evacuate in case something happens. That's just not the reality that people are living.
And
And a lot of
also
the
a lot
time,
of, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Maya.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also like the people that they're really mad at are like refugees and asylees, people whose countries we've displaced because of our role mismanaging their politics. for me personally, I feel like it's the least we can do. But for whatever reason, they're like, well, because you didn't come in this one way that I think you should come in, then you're illegal. And, we should, I don't know.
Well,
I don't even know what they think we should do. They say deport, but
I have
go ahead.
a thought. What you're talking about, Maya,
Mm-hmm.
they say we should deport. But let me tell you something. When I walked into a crisis intervention center over 21 years ago, I didn't even have a photo ID or a birth certificate to prove my identity. So, because I walked into a crisis intervention center without any form of identification, where were they supposed to send me? Back to my own country? Well, I was born in America.
Right. What are you supposed to do? It's just
What am I?
It's not a perfect world. It doesn't work like that.
What kind of privilege do you have? Like, I literally listened to a book called Bad Mormon, and one of the things that really struck me is how, like, when we're talking about the immigration issues, this is the way that people talk to historically. They talk to people who have experienced crisis and torture and trauma and violence, interpersonal violence in their homes. They say, well, why didn't you just leave? Oh, but you shouldn't have left that way. Oh, but you didn't do it the right way. Oh, but you didn't do it my way. And it's like there's every reason under the sun. Instead of understanding that these situations are complex and nuanced, and we have to provide the appropriate access to resources based on that specific person's need, and we need to move with an urgency, move with a sense of urgency, because people's lives are at stake. People sit there and gaslight people for how they left. And then that causes further complications of trauma, further harm. People die because of this. Mm-hmm. It is very privileged and very cliche and very easy to say from a black and white mentality that this is so easy as we can just go through these steps and it's all taken care of. No, that's not how it works.
And they do the same thing with other issues, like the next section, abortion. Sudden abortion. We're talking about border stuff. Now we're talking about abortion because that's what the movie itself does. It just, bloop, we're doing this now. And of course, the evangelicals believe a fetus is a full human with more rights than anyone who had the bad idea of being born, let alone growing up. But they never say why. There's a lot of emotional manipulation, comparisons to the Holocaust, pointing at racism, which is wild coming from these folks, but ultimately, it's dogmatic assertion. It's just propaganda. What do you folks think about this part?
Yeah, that was a bit frustrating. The way they were happily giving rights to essentially tissue, right? And I think if I remember correctly, there was a part of the movie where I looked at because my daughter watched some of it with me. We were like, is that AI? I'm not sure, but there was a part where they showed some kind of, like evacuation of, like
actual footage of an abortion. If I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I looked, but I believe that's footage from that film that certain states require be shown to all potential abortion people before they're allowed to get them. Like in those states where you have to watch an abortion before you can,
I'd like to, I need to look that up to see it for myself.
It's awfully graphic, isn't it? I know that's the point. That's why they do that.
Yeah, I just assumed it was AI, but I don't know.
Parts of this movie,
like size and whatnot, like relative size of like the two, because I've worked in the AR, and I just anyway, the size of the fetus didn't seem to make sense with what I was seeing on the screen.
Well, it's
very tiny, and at that size, it's not much there anyway.
Once upon a time, in 2006, 2007, I went to a cadaver lab, and I have seen myself multiple fetuses
Mm.
that were preserved for medical information. That is the most disingenuous depiction, and it starts with misinformation by definition of abortion. Abortion is simply
Right.
termination of a pregnancy, or even when people do a DNC,
It's an
dilation
abortion.
and carriage, it's an abortion, but it can also be done and performed because there's retained products of conception. But what happens when the fetus doesn't develop properly? There is no viability. There are multiple conditions, like people that have late term abortions usually have wanted to have this baby.
Right.
They wanted to have a child. And they are sitting here and giving all of this blatant misinformation, pretending that abortion is being used as birth control, when in actuality, abortion is medical care.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion is medical care, and it's simply, according to a contemporary consensus in the medical community, which you can find on NIH, it is a process of delivering a conception prior to the fetus viability, which is defined as 20 weeks of pregnancy, or a fetus weighing 500 grams or more. In several states, the weight requirement for viability has recently been reduced to 300 grams. What about the people that have ectopic pregnancies? What about the people, and if you don't know what ectopic pregnancies are, those are life-threatening conditions.
Yep.
When the fetus dies in utero, that is life-threatening. So whose life do you really care about?
I just saw somebody, their story was that I forget what it was called, but something like a prolapsed uterus or whatever, cervix. Their cervix would
Oh,
would
yeah.
not stay closed, and they did try to
Mm-hmm.
use something to close it up to see if it was viable, but unfortunately the water broke. There was nothing that they could do, and she almost, died because they were trying to delay the care that she so
Yep.
desperately needed.
Well, over and over and over, what happens is that medical care is delayed. This
Mhm.
is why we are seeing maternal mortality rates. That means that women who are pregnant, or people who are pregnant,
Mhm.
are literally dying at an increased rate because of the fact that they have legislated away their right to receive appropriate medical care.
Yep.
That is why we see the increased fetal mortality rate as well, because it delays access to medical care.
Yep.
Pregnancy can be a life-threatening condition.
Needs to be treated as such.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that people get too tied up in their own misconceptions of what an abortion is. I'm having these conversations with people on social media all the time, where I'm fighting for the abortion procedure, and people are thinking, for whatever reason, that abortions are only these like drunken sluts that it's like, oopsie, forgot my condom. And waddle into an abortion clinic after 8 months of pregnancy, like, oh, such a ditz, I totally forgot I didn't want to have this baby. Could you cut it out of me? And I really don't understand. Like, it's just cartoonishly evil what people are thinking that, or being told, is happening. And no, I don't believe that consent to have sex is consent to get pregnant. I wouldn't try to legislate my morals onto another woman. What I'm trying, me personally, and what I'm saying to other people out there, is that there's a procedure that we're trying to preserve, and there wasn't a procedure that was dreamt up by doctors only for women trying to term viable pregnancies. It is the same procedure that we would use for a fetus that would make it to term as one that has already expired, or is expired, not viable.
Mhm.
And what we're fighting for and women have miscarriages every single day, every single day. And they are using this procedure every single day. And when you are reducing the procedure in your head to something that, only happens like as a form of birth control, you're leaving a lot of people on the table. People are saying, oh, well, rape and incest, that's only, or I'm sorry, grape and incest, or only, 1%. I'm like, but the procedure's done every day. We're not just talking about 1% of
Okay.
cases here.
Okay, and let's be clear. I am a medical coder and auditor, and every time that somebody has a miscarriage, it is called an abortion in medical terms.
Mhm.
And so part of the ICD-10 classification of what we're doing when we talk about miscarriages, so when they track the amount of abortions, are they counting spontaneous abortions? Because that's a miscarriage classification. And then, as Maya said, that procedure, the DNC, that's what they do. They go in and they scrape out and they clean out routine products of conception. This can happen to women who have miscarriages that are spontaneously induced. The rate of spontaneously induced pregnancy miscarriages in America, I believe, is about 20%, if I'm not mistaken. So if 20% of all pregnancies naturally end in miscarriage, then why are we villainizing people for having miscarriages and trying to deny them access to that medical
They
care?
want us dead and under their thumb. It's intentional. I said it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I don't know that
And
they want
I
us dead, but the dead ones serve as a cautionary tale to the other
Right,
ones.
right. It's all about
Like, don't you
control.
dare think that you can have this abortion. You don't want to end up like Susie.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, they have to.
It's more
Nicer
fear to
than
keep
I think they
people.
And
want
now
us
that
dead.
Susie's not here to speak for herself, I can say that she did anything.
And we just don't approve of the way Susie lives. Susie wore jeans.
Oh, how dare fucking
That's right.
whore.
She was not demure,
Not
not mindful at all.
Not
Much
at all.
like the titular character who the movie only just near the end here finally comes to. It after all that abortion discussion, it just pivots again to Trump's character. And this is the most laughable section, in my opinion. We get a whole lot of ignoring or outright lying about what he's done, and a few excuses about how all people have flaws and God works with the people he's got, which he ostensibly made individually, fearfully and wonderfully so, I'm told. But I do digress. There's this section, and then the final section is a lot of preaching. We have no reason to believe in or care about what the big old book of fables has to say, so we're going to skip that part and move into our general discussion. So, on the subject of 45's character, what say you all?
Talk about anticlimax.
What
Oh,
are
no.
you? Oh my God, Amber.
Character.
Okay. He reminds his character, the way that he operates reminds me of somebody who was convicted of almost unaliving me. So, yeah, that's very interesting. I've always felt like that's kind of like a dishonorable character, maybe.
I'd say that qualifies, yeah.
Or even like he uses language that people who were convicted of sexual crimes use. So that always makes me feel like some kind of way about his character. Like
That makes sense.
it makes
since he
me
was convicted of
question.
sexual crimes, yeah.
And like the other criminal charges, one of my he went to prison
34 felonies and counting.
Like I just feel like the parallels, it's entirely too familiar to me. And so therefore, what say I about his character? He's a wannabe. I feel like he's a wannabe dictator.
He already said that.
Yes, he's going to fix it. He has a surprise for everybody. You just have to vote this one last time, and you're never going to have to worry about
Never
it.
gonna have to vote
And
again.
I mean,
In fact, you won't be able to vote again. Details.
But also,
Thanks for the help.
he lies. The way you know that he's lying, honestly, it's really because he's talking. But then
my goodness.
Right.
And people say he's so honest. People
He
just
lied from day one.
Yeah, but like,
not.
and when you say, well, he said this, it's like, oh, he didn't mean that. He's just talking.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yes,
the way
he's just
that he
talking.
talks, the way, like, I feel like his character is predatory. I
Yeah.
feel like he's a predator.
Oh, there's no feel about it. It's objectively true. Like
Yeah,
when he
we have court
threatened
documents.
the Georgia state administrator to find more votes.
Oh,
He
but
didn't
Amber,
ask.
you
He
were
didn't
just
beg. He threatened.
misunderstanding that.
Oh, for sure. Like when he lied about his crowd sizes. We know how he is about his crowd sizes. Day one in the Oval Office, he says, oh, I've got my inauguration had a bigger attendance than any other president ever. Mm-hmm. And people are looking at the photos from Obama's inauguration, and the frickin' Washington Mall is full. And with Trump's, you have to zoom in to the very first section, and it's still only half full. Mm-hmm. We can see you're lying, Donald.
Well, Amber, you have to realize your crowd size is in direct proportion to certain body parts.
Yeah, I guess.
You know what? I also feel like it's the entitlement.
Oh, yeah.
He feels he is owed something.
Oh, yeah.
He feels like the world owes him something.
A small loan of $1 million.
Well, it's that 1% mentality, right? Like they own everything, they deserve everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone has been everybody has been catering to the 1% their entire life. They don't know how to deal with rejection. Like they've never had to. They say never. Like they don't experience it to the level that the non-wealthy do. And so when you throw money around and people are used to catering to you because they believe that they can get money too, you surround yourself with a bunch of yes men. You really don't have to deal with rejection or working with others to the extent that those of us who don't have that amount of power do. And yeah, like you turn into the world's biggest baby.
Yeah, he's failed upward his entire freaking life.
Yeah.
I mean, people have talked endlessly about all his failed businesses. But just to cite one, he failed at running a fucking casino. And he got richer.
It's pretty
And I just want to know, how can we have a convicted felon running for office? I'm asking for a friend. Convicted felons often
Yeah.
Half the country is racist.
Are you perfect? I'm not perfect. He doesn't have to be perfect. That Saul in the Bible, he wasn't perfect. King David wasn't perfect.
Okay, but
Obama wore Tams too.
That was their rationale, is that God chooses imperfect people and he works through them.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
God chooses imperfect people.
Because all people are imperfect. We need to make but it's interesting you bring that up because it was in an earlier section. So we'll kind of just go into our overall discussion with this. But they go to great lengths to talk about how all rulers are anointed and appointed by God. And that's how we know Trump is the designee of God. Except he's not the one in charge right now. If all rulers are designated by God, then doesn't that mean Biden is God's appointee?
And Obama, the Antichrist.
Yeah. What do we mean? What is this nonsense?
No, God appoints presidents that I approve of. Apparently.
Yeah, it's only the ones God works in mysterious ways, but only the true believers can tell what God's doing. Like, one person made the argument that Obama was put in place to implement policies so that Trump could do away with those policies. Because Trump is the chosen one. Well, then why did God put Obama there in the first place? He could spare us both Obama and Trump. We could have had Hillary or something,
Amber, really, I don't believe that the government is appointed by God. So, can we not go there?
Well, you atheists, you can't prove there isn't a God.
You can't prove to me there is a God. So let's.
How dare you? Both are so blasphemous.
How dare you? You know, that's an interesting thing. This evangelical thing, these people behind this movie. According to the Bible, blasphemy is taking credit from God and giving it to someone else. Like if God saves your life and you thank the doctors, that's blasphemy. So
Okay.
when these people say Jesus is God, they are literally blaspheming.
We don't talk about that though. It's blasphemy is really people like me saying God, if he exists, has a divine plan that is rotten. You know the fruit of the apple. You know the apple tree by its fruits. You know people by the fruits of their labors.
Mm-hmm.
Which
And
applies very
sometimes
strongly to the
the
dog.
whole damn tree is fucking rotten. Okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
That's fair. All right, folks, we need to start wrapping up here. Before we go, everybody want to take a chance to give their final thoughts, where to find you, all of that stuff. Let's go the other way around and start with Mary.
Oh, you want to start with me? Well, everybody, if you're out here, if you're, thinking about voting, please consider voting. And you know what else? Here's another thing is that whenever you vote, your vote should be cast in privacy, unlike when we voted in church and it was a public vote to see if you were really submissive to God and God's will and to your husband or your father or your brother or whatever patriarch was in charge of you. But I digress. It's your private thing. You don't have to tell anybody who you voted for. You don't have to actually let anybody see how you fill out the ballot. So if anybody interferes, you can always report that as interference, because that is considered election interference to interfere with your ability to cast your vote in private. And you, as an American who is voting, has the right to cast your vote in private, and nobody has the right to know who you voted for unless it's the poll worker counting your vote to count it for the election. So I'd encourage you to do whatever you need to do to be safe and to vote in your best interests, because each of you matters. Your lives are important. People with uteruses matter. Our lives are important. We deserve access to healthcare. We deserve access to democracy. I mean, that's I find it important, but you might find different things important, and that's up to you. But I'm
That's
letting
your
you know what's
freedom.
important to me. Freedom is important. The idea of freedom is important. I've lived a life where I felt like I was a slave, where I felt like I was property, where I was used and abused for labor and child sex abuse and you name it. And we don't need to go back there. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you, and each of you deserves a life that is worth living.
Well
Thank
said.
you.
Yeah.
Kind of feel like Mary dropped the mic and it
Right?
froze. It's hard to follow.
Yep.
Haha, you
No,
got
no pressure, Maya. No pressure.
No pressure at all.
You got this,
Be
Maya.
my buffer, Maya. Be my buffer.
Right. All right. Well, I'm going to open up with I agree with what Logan says here. How do we have hurricanes if God isn't real? The rainbows afterward prove it's just a prank.
Jokesies.
Hello.
Look around you. That's proof that God is real, Maya.
You know what? And I tell everybody that comes by my channel, I am the goddess. And how do you know that I am the goddess? Because I have defined goddesses as me. And I am, by definition, real. I've proven myself. So come by at Maya Atkinson tomorrow night, 9:30. Commune with the cult as we debunk more bad science on the internet. Also, if you have not already done so, Tuesday is election night. Vote and bring a friend.
That's right. Drag them by their bootstraps. How about you, Ryan?
As far as my last words for the movie, I feel it was very apocalyptic movie. It was meant to incite fear. I think that was all intentional, like theocratic warfare imagery, because that is what was coming to my mind as a former Jehovah's Witness. And at the end of the day, there's real victims out there, and it's going to be our democracy, and also at the expense of the Palestinian people, now Lebanese people. And it's just going to continue because this is setting a really big precedent. It was terrifying. And I honestly suggest y'all watch it. I would have told you before, don't watch it, but I really think you should see what it's hitting for. If you want to follow me in my journey as I try to unwind from this type of indoctrination, you can follow me here on Ryan Cultastic, and as well as like other places. I'm sure you'll see my face. But yeah, I'd love for you to be there as I kind of figure this out as I go as well.
Yeah, we're all just kind of, well, we're evolving as we go. And but
Yeah.
I agree. It is important to keep an eye on what the people who want the worst for us are up to, what they believe, what lies they're spreading to each other, so that we can use our critical thinking and see where they're mistaken and what we can do about it. Because what is freedom for if we don't use it to protect ourselves and each other from existential threats? I, of course, am Ember. Better than Ember, in fact. I'm better than I've ever been. And you can find... I'm glad you appreciate that.
I love wordplay, Amber.
I do way too much on the internet. So all of my links are on my website, betterthanember.com. And thank you all so much for watching. And a big thank you to our patrons, Paul Kamish, Karen Butcher, Puck, Helen Green, Logan Fisher, Amanda McLeod, Eric Ozals, Ryan, Denise Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Sonny Shell, Aaron Colson, and Phil Calderon. If you want to add your name to that list, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/skeptichaven. And if you made it all the way through this show, you must like this kind of thing. So be sure you're subscribed to make sure you also catch Let's Talk, Black Freethinkers, The Sunny Spot, 30 and 60, Global Atheists, of course, more Women Atheists Unload, and the odd special here and there, like last week's Halloween extravaganza. Until next time, remember, you don't have to concoct a bizarre eschatology based on Bronze Age books to prop up political plots, because you are better than religion. Good night.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh- I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh- I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh- I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play